Hello and good evening. My name is Catherine and I work with SEB Housing. This is the information session for the 20 affordable rental units at Richmond Meadows 2 in Nantucket. These units are going to be made available with phases 3 and 4 of this larger community and project down in Nantucket. And the purpose of this session is to give a little bit of background information on the affordable units. We're also going to discuss the application, the eligibility and lottery process, and what to expect after the lottery drawing. So I have some slides that I'll be flipping through. They should be on your screen now. If you have any questions during the session, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. I'll be asking during the presentation whether or not there are any questions before I go ahead and move on to the next section. So if you missed the session or if you missed part of the session, it is going to be posted to SEB Housing's YouTube channel after the next half hour or so. So you'll see it up there if you need to review it after the fact. Because you should have also received a notice when you came into the meeting that it's being recorded. So just a heads up there. If you have any questions after tonight's session, you can email us. That's the best way to get in touch with us at info@sebhousing.com, or you can call us at the number that's on your screen now, the 617 number, if you have any questions. Just for some background information though on who SEB Housing is. So we are a off-site affordable housing consulting group. We're not the on-site management team at Richmond Meadows. We have been hired by the developer to market the affordable units, conduct this information session, collect and review lottery applications to determine an applicant's eligibility in order to run the lottery. So in the initial phases, we are going to be your main point of contact rather than the management office, but then further on along in the process, the on-site management team or leasing office will be your main point of contact for these units. So there are a few steps that need to happen in order to both apply for the lottery and then to qualify for one of these affordable rental units. And the first step in the process is to apply for the lottery itself and be found eligible for the lottery by us. And in order to qualify for the lottery, we're going to make a preliminary decision on your lottery application to confirm that you're income eligible for the affordable housing program. So you'll be in touch with SEB Housing during that process. We can answer any questions you have on the affordable housing program. We're going to process your application. The second step in the process is to qualify to lease a unit with the leasing office. So you're going to be in touch with the leasing office at Richmond Meadows at that point. And that is separate from the screenings that you'd have with SEB Housing. So that lease screening at the management office might include things like a credit check, a rental history check, background checks, the types of things that you might be familiar with from renting elsewhere. And then the third step in the process is once you have been approved by the management or leasing office as lease eligible, you're then going to be directed back to us at SEB Housing, so we can then ask you to provide all of the verifications of income, assets, tax documentation, that sort of thing that was listed on your lottery application. So you'd have about 10 days to gather that information and submit it to us so we can review your application. So in order to apply for the Richmond Meadows lottery, you first have to submit the lottery application, and you can get that in a few different places. So if you go to our website at sebhousing.com and you select I want to rent, since this is a rental opportunity, you're going to see a page specific to Richmond Meadows phase 3 and 4. And then if you click on that, you'll be taken to a specific page for the property that has a downloadable version of the application and information packet. It's posted there in 3 languages, in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. And that information packet contains most of the material that I'm going to be covering during this information session. I won't have time to cover everything in the packet, so I would still suggest you take a look at that if you are interested in submitting an application and renting a unit at Richmond Meadows. So if you choose to apply for one of the affordable units, you're first going to need to complete that lottery application. Like I said, you can submit that to us in one of several ways as well. You can email it to us, you can scan it to us, you can fax it by regular mail. If you happen to be in the Needham area, which I know many of you probably are not, but if you are up in the Boston or Needham area, we have a 24-hour drop box as well that's secure, and you can drop it off at our offices at 257 Hillside Ave. Whichever one of those options is easiest for you. And then if you're already living on Nantucket, I should also mention that you can also pick up a lottery application. They are available right now at Nantucket Town Hall, as well as the public library and at the Richmond Meadows leasing office, which is at 1 Orchard Place. The developer has made those available for anyone who would like to pick them up, would like to pick up a hard copy rather than going to our website. So we encourage you to get that lottery application in early. It is fairly brief because remember that there is no supporting documentation that is needed to apply for the lottery itself. That will come later. So it should only take you about 10 minutes to complete, and those applications are due on February 6th. They have to be delivered or postmarked by that date in order to be considered. You do not need to be a resident of Nantucket to apply for this lottery, although there are going to be several units that will have local preference for residents of Nantucket. We'll discuss a little bit more about that later on, but just a heads up on that. Just switching the slides here. So yeah, lottery applications are due February 6th. There are a lot of different units that are available within this lottery at different income tiers. Those are on your screen now, and I'm going to flip back to that in just a minute. So just quickly to remind you, there is a website for the property. That's on your screen now, richmondgreatpoint.com, and then /Meadows2. And you can find a little bit more information on there about floor plans, amenities, that sort of thing. The units are expected to come online shortly after the lottery, so sometime next month, they'll be ready for leases. And just to give you a rundown a little bit more about the development and the units themselves. So on your screen right now, you can see that there's some details about the kitchens, the community, the utilities, that sort of thing. So again, phase 3 and 4 of Richmond Meadows 2, the rental development. This is the latest phase in a larger housing community, which is going to total 225 rental apartments. It's located off of Old South Road in the town of Nantucket. And there are these 20 affordable apartments that are located within these 2 newest phases, and they're scheduled to be available next month. So the units feature quality stainless steel appliances, in-unit laundry, central air conditioning, and there is 1 parking space per bedroom that's included in the rent. So for example, if you're renting a 2-bedroom unit, there would be 2 parking spaces that would be available for you. The community also has designated open spaces, play areas for children, and it provides access to local biking and walking paths. So it sounds like a good community, and they have a lot of things going on around them. I think there is also going to be some shopping that is being built across the street. So all tenants will be responsible for electricity costs, and that includes the expense of electric heating, hot water, and cooking. Water and sewer charges for households that are renting the 70% and 80% AMI units will be included in the rent. But if you're renting one of the 110% or 120% units, you as the tenant would be responsible for your own water and sewer charges. So I'm going to get back in just a few minutes about what that means, the 70%, 80%, all of that in just a second. So these 20 affordable apartments are being made available through this application process, and they're going to be rented to households which qualify across a broad range of income limits related to the area median income in Nantucket. So what that means is there are some apartments that are going to be more expensive than others. There are different income limits depending on which apartment you're looking to rent. And these rents have been, or the different units and the income limits have been determined and are based off of the area median income for Nantucket. So there's units that are available to households making up to 70% of the area median income. And then there's also 80% units, 110%, and 120% units. So you may qualify for these units depending on whether or not your income is in between, 70% and 120% of the area median income. So rather than read through the specifics of all of the units that I just mentioned, I have it on your screen here in the slide. And there's a few different addresses that are listed. As you can see, there's some units, there's affordable units at 47 Beachgrass Road, 49 Beachgrass Road, Violet Place. There's 3 different addresses there. So I've listed out all of the different units, and you'll see that, just rather than reading through all the specifics that you can see in the information packet, I have it on your screen here now. There are affordable studio, 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom units being offered throughout the 4 separate income tiers. So not every income tier has each unit size, but there are a total of 5 studio units, 5 studio affordable units that have 450 square feet. There's 7 1-bedroom units, which have 700 square feet. There are a total of 5 affordable 2-bedroom units, which have 950 square feet. And there's 3 3-bedroom units, which have 1,350 square feet. And again, this is, different addresses have different unit sizes and all of that, as you can see in the information packet and on your screen right now. There is 1 disabled accessible unit being made available within these phases. It is a 2-bedroom unit, and it's one of the 120% AMI units. So these affordable rents are not set in accordance with the applicant's or household's income or financial circumstances. So this means that the rent is the rent. It's not going to change if your income changes, unfortunately. That's just not how the program works. For this housing program, the rents are set using a formula that is based on HUD. So that's the Department of Housing and Urban Development, area median income for the Nantucket area. The rent may increase once per year, and this typically occurs when HUD revises their AMI, their area median income each spring. There's always advance notice given to households whenever there is a rent increase. And usually the increases are modest, around $25 to $75, and the rents would never change within the middle of your lease term. Since it's possible that there's going to be more interested and eligible applicants than there are available units, there's 20 units, that's why we're having this lottery process for households who are earning up to 120% of the area median income for Nantucket. So we're going to talk about the income limits next. Covered a lot of the logistics and a little bit of an overview of the units at Richmond Meadows. If you have any questions, let me know before I move on to the eligibility requirements. All right. All right, so who's eligible to apply? On page 7 of the information packet, if you are looking at that later, you will see that there are 4 eligibility requirements listed on that page. The first is that households must have a qualifying income. So I'm going to talk more about the income parameters in just a few minutes, but for this lottery, applicants must have a household income at or below 120% of the area median income shown on your screen right now. There are the different tiers. So in order to qualify for one of those tiers, you'll need to be under the income limit shown there. The second item to keep in mind for eligibility purposes is that household priority is going to be given based on household composition. So for example, if you are a 1-person household or a couple that shares a bedroom, you're going to be considered a type 1 household. You can apply for a 2-bedroom unit, but the larger type 2 and type 3 households who have more people typically are going to be placed ahead of you on that 2-bedroom waiting list. Some examples of type 2 and type 3 households would be all households that have 3 or 4 people, as well as some 2-person households. And page 12 of the information packet lists more details on household size and type. So the third eligibility criteria, this really doesn't come up very often, but households cannot have financial interest in the development and can't be considered a related party. So these units are being offered by Richmond Great Point Development, LLC. So if you happen to work for them, or if you are related to the developer in some way, you might not be eligible for this opportunity. In addition, if you own a home right now, it would need to be sold and your name would need to be off the deed before you'd be able to sign a lease at Richmond Meadows. So to circle back to the first eligibility criteria to explain more your income and assets, since these are affordable units, they're only going to be made available to households who qualify based on these income limits, and they're going to be made available to rent at prices that are lower than identical market rate apartments within the same building or community. So the maximum income limits are set by household size. So they include, you want to include everyone who's going to be living in your unit is going to be listed on the lease when you are looking at these income limits. So again, these limits are listed in the information packet as well, and they're on our website. If you look at our website and go over to Richmond Meadows page. But as you can see here, if you are looking to rent a 70% area median income unit, your maximum income limit for a 2-person household, for example, is going to be $65,931. If you make more than that, you might be qualifying for a 80% unit instead, and so forth. So you can see all the different income limits here. You want to figure out how many people are in your household, and then just go ahead and see what units you might qualify for. Just again, a reminder, when you submit your application, we do not need verification of your income right off the bat when you submit the lottery application. But when you submit your application, you are going to be provided with a documentation requirements guide. So when you get that requirements guide, what we're doing there is to try to prepare you for the information that will be needed from you later on in the process, so you can start gathering that information. If you're found eligible for the lottery, we'll send you that guide by email. So the guide, again, just details exactly what types of documentation we're going to need from you, depending on what your source of income is. But generally, for everyone, no matter what type of income you are you're receiving or earning, you are going to need your last year's federal tax returns, any bank statements, if you have any accounts, any of your most recent bank statements we will need. If you're working, we're going to need recent pay stubs from you. And so although we aren't going to be asking for income verification right now, I just want to give you a basic overview of how your income will be calculated when we're determining if you're eligible for the affordable housing program. So income for this program is counted as a projection of your income over the next 12 months for all household members. So all household income will be included. This includes, bonuses, overtime, seasonal work, that sort of thing. The only exceptions are minors. So anyone in your household who's under the age of 18 who is working, we're not going to count their wage income. And then also dependent full-time students who are working, we're only going to be counting the first $480 of their income when we're determining your eligibility. We are required to count gross income, not net. So the amount that you make before taxes is what we're going to need to count. Although, you do not take home that full amount of your salary, it is required that we use that amount when we're determining eligibility. And then also, how we calculate income is not one size fits all for every household. Everyone's income circumstances are unique. So there's going to be some applicants who have a weekly steady salary. It's consistent throughout the year. And then other people might be working seasonally, or they could be self-employed. And in those circumstances, we may need to look further back into the past in order to project anticipated income for the next 12 months. Specifically for applicants who are self-employed, you're going to need to complete a profit and loss statement and provide supporting documentation for your business. Your business expenses will be taken into account, but for any households who are not self-employed, it is still, like I said, going to be the gross income that we need to count. So in general, any income that you have been making, we're going to assume that you will continue to make it going forward, unless we have some sort of definitive documentation that you're no longer going to be earning that income source. So for example, you might submit a letter from your employer stating that bonuses or overtime are not going to be paid or allowed in the coming year, but we aren't permitted to accept statements from applicants. So if we're looking at your application and your tax documentation and all of that, and we're seeing that you made about $80,000 in the last year, but you are saying that you plan to only make about $50,000 in this coming year, we're still going to need to count that $80,000 unless we have something from a written statement from your employer or some sort of official documentation to consider. When you're submitting your application, you want to make sure that you are listing all income sources. There is a table on the application just to confirm for you what types of income we're talking about, but just to give you an idea, not just wage income, but any benefits you might be receiving, Social Security, child support, alimony, unemployment, workman's comp, pension payments, that sort of thing. Periodic payments, even from friends or family. We might need a statement from your family member confirming the amount and frequency of those payments. And then we need to count any asset income. So if you have assets that are generating income, that would be considered you would want to list that, on your application as income. So there is no minimum income for the affordable housing program. However, most management teams, and that includes the team at Richmond Meadows, want to be sure that all tenants can afford to pay the rent. So regardless of whether or not that household is market rate or is in an affordable unit, the management company has set a minimum household income equivalent to 2 times the monthly rent. This amount, again, varies depending on whether or not you are looking to rent a 70% AMI unit versus 120% AMI unit. So it's in the information packet. There's a lot of, you can see those minimum income estimates on pages 8 and 9. To give you an example, household looking to rent a studio apartment that is a 70% AMI unit, the approximate minimum household income is $31,800. And then if you're looking to rent a studio at 80%, the minimum income is $36,744. Any household or applicants who have mobile housing vouchers, so such as Section 8, MRVP, you can disregard those minimum income amounts in the information packet because they do not apply to you. Because your housing agency, of course, is determining what your rent share is, and you won't be paying the full rent at the apartments if you have that voucher. However, any applicant who does have a housing voucher, you want to check in with your housing agency that issues your voucher to confirm that the rents are within the agency's payment standards or maximum rent. The leasing office at Richmond Meadows will also confirm with your housing authority that the rents are permissible, but it is, of course, best for you to know sooner rather than later if these rents are going to work for you and your voucher. Applicants without a voucher, you need to have incomes between that minimum income floor that I mentioned and the maximum program income limit. The only exception to this is households with incomes that are just below that minimum income amount, that floor. If a household is close to that minimum floor but has liquid assets that might be able to be accessed to afford the rent, your application might be considered by the leasing office. It really is the management or leasing office's determination during lease screening whether or not a household meets that minimum income requirement. Rental opportunities do not have an asset limit. So you can have a significant amount of assets. You might be retired and still be eligible for this affordable housing program in these units. We are still going to need to collect your information related to assets, although there is no limit. And that's because if there's income generated by your assets, the income is going to count towards your total household income. And when we're talking about assets, it's not just checking or savings accounts or CDs. It would be the net cash value of any IRAs or 401ks. Also, we will be asking for Venmo or PayPal statements, stocks, bonds, that sort of thing. We do not need documents related to personal assets such as jewelry or cars, that sort of thing. All right, so I covered the criteria, eligibility criteria for the housing program and the lottery. So just a reminder, again, if you have any questions, let me know by either unmuting yourself or going ahead and typing it into the chat. So to talk about the lottery eligibility, so as I mentioned earlier, if you're interested in applying, you should do that as soon as possible to get the process started. I do want to mention too that if you are interested in applying for more than one unit size, so maybe you might be interested in both a studio or a one-bedroom unit, you should indicate that on your application. There's really no downside to doing that. You can apply for as many unit sizes as you are interested in. There is a potential downside to only applying to one unit size, because if you later decide that you're interested in a larger unit, for example, you may not be able to rent one of those apartments if the waiting list is pretty full, or if it's leased before they would get to your placement on the waiting list. So once you get the lottery application into SEB Housing, we're going to review that application and contact you if there's any missing information or if any information appears to be incorrect. So you're going to have the chance to correct or resubmit as necessary. If you're found eligible for the lottery, you're going to be sent a lottery application number in the form of a series of numbers. So that is just meant to be an anonymous identifier. So your name is not called during the lottery itself. It's not a ranking of any sort at this point. It just corresponds with the order in which your application was received. So if you were the first person to submit your application, your lottery application, your application number is going to be A.001. The letter that you receive with that application number, it is also going to confirm whether or not your household qualifies for local preference. So you will have indicated on your application that you believe your household qualifies for this preference. And if the necessary verification has been submitted, we will confirm for you. Yep, so question here about sending the application. You can email, mail, you can scan it, and you wanted me to repeat the address. Sure. So you can send your application to info@sebhousing.com, or our address is 257 Hillside Ave in Needham. And I'm going to type that into the chat just so you have it. And let me get the zip code for you while I'm here. And then, yeah, I mean, you can scan it in, you can mail it in, whatever is easiest for you. I should know this by heart by now, I would think. Yep, and the zip code is 02494. Whatever's easiest for you. And again, you can get those applications both from our website. If you go to I would like to rent, and you'll see Richmond Meadows listed there. Or if you're on Nantucket already, you can get those at the public library, town hall, and then also at the leasing office at Richmond Meadows. All right, so that email confirmation that you receive after you have been found eligible for the lottery. It's going to confirm the bedroom sizes that you applied for, as well as whether or not you indicated that you need a disabled accessible unit. Applicants who need a disabled accessible unit are going to have priority for those units over households who do not need the features of a disabled accessible unit. And to circle back real quick on local preference, local preference might apply to your household if you currently live on Nantucket, you work for the town, or you work at a business located in the town, or if you have a child in your household who is attending Nantucket Public Schools. Up to 70% of the affordable units, of these 20 affordable units, are going to have local preference, which means that some local preference households will have priority for those units when compared to households who don't have local preference. But again, you do not need to have local preference to apply for these units, and all of them will certainly likely not be rented to, or they won't be rented to only Nantucket residents. And so finally, the document requirements guide is going to be provided to you once you have been found eligible for the lottery. So the guide, again, is just going to provide details on all of the items you're going to need to submit prior to final approval by SCB Housing. So we suggest once you get that guide in hand, you review it so you're aware of the documentation that you're going to need to supply to us if you want to move forward in reserving a unit following the lottery. So if you're found ineligible at any time during this process, you're going to be sent an ineligibility notice. So for example, maybe you're over income. You're going to be informed by email, and you're encouraged to contact us with any questions. We're happy to give it a second review or just answer the questions you have on your ineligibility notice. Also on your application, you're going to indicate your household type, either 1, 2, or 3. Smaller households, just a reminder on this too, smaller households may apply for larger units, but in general, larger households will have priority over smaller households. The information packet has a lot more information about household types and the priority of the waiting list. But for an example, a type 1 household may apply for a 2-bedroom unit, but all type 2 and 3 households are going to have priority over that type 1 household on the waiting list. The lottery itself is going to be held virtually, just like this, via Zoom on February 15th at 6 p.m. Depending on the number of eligible applicants we have, the lottery numbers will either be drawn from a box and held up to the screen, or they will be digitally randomized, and the results will be shared with you via screen share, just like this presentation is being shared. Every lottery number will be drawn during this lottery. Sometimes when we think of lotteries, we think that there's just one winner per unit, for example, but really the purpose of this lottery is to establish an order for the waiting list. So while in general it is more beneficial to be called early in the lottery, it doesn't necessarily mean, or it isn't necessarily the deciding factor on whether or not you'll be moving forward in the process to lease a unit, since we will still need to sort the results by priorities afterwards. So if a type 1 household is drawn first in the lottery, they're the first number that we pick out of that box, and they've applied for a 2-bedroom unit, they're still going to be behind all of those type 2 households on the 2-bedroom waiting list. Also, households who were entered into the lottery may later be found ineligible by the leasing office, or might ultimately decide not to rent a unit. So really, the takeaway is if your number is drawn later in the lottery, you shouldn't lose hope of being able to rent one of these units. You might still have that opportunity because there's a lot of factors, even after the lottery itself, that need to play out. So after the lottery, we are going to populate the waiting list. We're going to take local preference and whether or not your household requires a disabled accessible feature into consideration. We're going to do our best to send those waiting lists to all applicants as soon as possible. Typically, they're sent no later than the morning after the lottery. So they'll be sent to all applicants by email or regular mail if you do not have an email address. When you're reviewing that email, you're going to find your lottery application number, and you can see where you fall on the waiting list. So you're going to have a better idea at that point whether or not you might be invited to move forward to the next step in the process. And that next step in the process, of course, is to apply for the lease with the leasing office. Following the lottery, we're going to connect you with the management team. Your contact information will be provided to that management team at Richmond Meadows, and you'll also be given their contact information so that applying for lease step can begin. And you will have about 5 days to connect with the management team and initiate that lease screening process. You can tour the apartments at that point and get in touch with them. So just a reminder again, SCB Housing screens for lottery and program eligibility. We don't screen your household for lease eligibility. The management team is going to be doing that. And during their lease screening, again, it might include background check, rental history check, credit check to determine if you're eligible to rent with them. You should be aware that the leasing office may invite more households to complete a lease screening than they have available units. So for example, at Richmond Meadows 2, there's only one 2-bedroom 80% AMI affordable unit, but they may invite 5 or more households forward from the waiting list to complete their lease screening. This is typical for management companies, and they often do this because the process of leasing units is slowed down by households who either don't qualify or decide they don't want to rent here. So just be aware of that. You might be called forward when they actually might lease the unit to someone who's higher up on the waiting list than you. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but just a heads up on that. So for this reason, if you're the first household on the waiting list, you still don't want to give immediate notice to your current landlord if you're renting, because you still need to be lease approved by the management company. And then we at SCB Housing still need to collect and review your income, asset, and tax documentation. So there's still a couple steps in the process. Once you're lease approved by the management company, this is a point in the process that having a position near the top of the waiting list is particularly beneficial, because if you are that top household on the waiting list, you're going to have the first chance to reserve an affordable unit. So if you're the top position on the 2-bedroom 80% AMI waiting list, you're going to have the first choice at reserving one of the affordable 2-bedroom units. And this is true even if another applicant who is positioned behind you on the waiting list happens to complete their lease application with the management team before you do. So you'll always maintain your position on the waiting list. You just want to make sure that you are replying and responding to the notices that the leasing office sends to you, so you maintain your spot on the waiting list. So you'll be able to tour the units and make the decision on which unit you're looking to rent based on whatever factors are important to you. So maybe you are looking for a certain location within the building or a certain date that you would like to sign a lease for. You can make that decision as the first person on the waiting list. And then the second household on the waiting list will have the second choice of the remaining units, and so on. So once you've reserved an affordable unit, the leasing office at Richmond Meadows is going to notify us here at SCB Housing, and we'll then contact you to coordinate the submission of all of your income, asset, and tax documentation that will now be required in order for us to complete your final program eligibility review. So hopefully by this point in the process, you've been able to review the documentation requirements guide that was sent along with your lottery number, and you've started to gather that documentation for this final review. And again, you'll have about 10 days from the date that you reserved a unit with the leasing office to submit all of the supporting documentation. There's a lot of information to submit, so if you don't provide everything on your first attempt, you're going to be sent an incomplete notice and given another chance to complete your application. So there's no worries if you don't have everything on the first try. That's usually the case because there is so much to submit. And also sometimes you submit everything on the first try and we have a question on something and we need you to submit something else. So just keep that in mind. It's normal. So once SCB Housing approves your file, we're going to notify you, and eligible households will then be able to sign the lease with the management team, and a move-in date can be established with the leasing office. Our program certifications are good for 6 months. So if for any reason you move in more than 6 months after completing your application process, which I'm sure is unlikely, but just wanted to let you know that you may need to submit updated income documentation if you do have a later move-in date. All right. So once you're leased, you're done with affordable housing screenings, income screenings until your lease renewal date. And we hope that you love your unit and want to continue living there beyond the first year of your lease. If you do, you will need to recertify your income with the leasing office prior to your lease renewal. So we usually just, our advice to everyone who's renting an affordable unit is to keep a folder or a binder of some sort with your, income, asset, and tax documentation, so you have that ready for your recertification. If at that annual renewal your income has increased and you're now making above that 70, 80, 110, 120% of the area median income, that's fine, because households remain eligible for the affordable apartment as long as the household income does not exceed 140% of the current year's area median income. And then also, if you're renting 110% or 120% unit, you're still going to be eligible for the affordable unit unless your household income has exceeded 160%. So it's even higher for those two income tiers. Pages 23 and 24 of the information packet lists those 140% and 160% figures for the different household sizes. But for example, if you're a household of 2, you would have qualified for an 80% AMI unit through the lottery with an income of $75,000, $75,350 or less. That same family at their annual renewal can make up to $105,490 at the time of their recertification in order to remain eligible for that affordable apartment. So gives a little bit of breathing room there for if you get a raise at work or you just have some more income coming into the household after that first year. So that covers everything I wanted to get through on the eligibility application process, the information that's in the information packet. Again, you can find the lottery application for Richmond Meadows at our website at scbhousing.com. And then if you click on I would like to rent, you're going to see Richmond Meadows listed there. If you are on Nantucket, you can also get the application at the library, town hall, at the leasing office. And then again, any questions after tonight, if you think of anything, or if you're watching this after the fact and you have any questions, you can contact us at the number that's on your screen, so the 617 number, or info@scbhousing.com. Any questions before I say goodnight? All right, again, just encourage you to get your application in as soon as possible. We'll get back to you if there's anything missing on that. And again, the deadline is for the lottery applications is February 6th, so about 3 weeks away. Thanks so much for joining in and have a good night.